Hello, and welcome to episode 198 of the Book Binge and my monthly reading wrap up and TBR video covering what I read in November of this year and what I'm going to read in December of this year, rounding out 2024, which is really weird to say because I feel like it was not that long ago that we just had the end of 2023. It feels like not that long ago that I just tore down these Christmas lights, and now I have put them back up for the duration of the month, hence the Santa hat as well. Every video on the channel this month has the hat and the lights, as opposed to last year where some of those videos I recorded ahead of time and therefore did not have the festivity setup going, which was a little disappointing. This time around, I'm fixing that. Either way, let's just talk about the reading of November. November, for the first half of the month, I can safely say was pretty terrible for me reading wise. I did not get through nearly as much as I wanted to, or rather nearly as much as I frankly should have, given how much time off I had. Early in the month I had like a 5-day weekend, but I spent like one morning of that entire weekend reading, which is really kind of crazy and weird. It's been a pretty mixed reading month because of that. The first half of it was awful, but then by the back half of the month things were picking up. So in the end, it ended up being a pretty decent, a solid reading month. It wasn't exceptional like I kind of planned for it to be, but it also wasn't like the worst thing in the world once things finally started to pick up. So let's actually wrap up November 2024 reading with the fact that I first off read Ruin by John Quinn, so third book in The Faithful and the Fallen, and like I said, the first half of the reading month went pretty terribly for me. I predicted that I would be able to read this in about 2 weeks or so. Given that I read Valor all in 1 week, I was thinking that that would be pretty doable as long as I kept even a pretty decent pace, but it didn't quite happen. I believe by the time I was finishing this book, it had been about 3 weeks of the month, so that wasn't great for me timing wise. I did manage to get some more stuff done in the aftermath, but that's just because the last week's worth of reading or so has been pretty productive. Ruin, I would say, however, just to kind of wrap up my thoughts on it, was a pretty good book. I enjoyed it. I didn't love it quite as much as Valor, however. I think because of certain pacing issues, like the pacing of it seemed a little bit off for the first like 2/3. By the time things started to really blow up in the last third, it was reading just as quickly, however, which was nice. But there were a couple decisions near the very end of the book that I wasn't super hot on. If you want to know a little bit more about my thoughts on that in some sort of detail, albeit not necessarily super spoilery, I'll have a review of that book actually coming a month from today. So if you're more interested in that, that coverage will be happening pretty soon. What I did manage to read after I finished Ruin, however, were a couple of shorter books, which, thank goodness, they kind of got my pace back up on track. For the Red Company, the Sun Eater fan Discord, we did a read-along in November for A Canticle for Leibowitz by Walter M. Miller Jr., which of course is a post-apocalyptic novel following a few groups of people as a sort of post-nuclear fallout society starts to live and goes through the cycle of history. It's made up of 3 parts. Each of those parts follows different people at different periods of time, each in 600-year intervals about, and knowing that ahead of time actually really helped me personally enjoy it. I think people who don't realize that are very likely to get whiplash at the end of part 1 and beginning of part 2 and be like, wait, this isn't what I signed up for, and then just kind of dislike parts 2 and 3. I really loved the first 2 parts of A Canticle for Leibowitz, man. They were incredible. Like, just really, truly mind-blowing stuff. Really great written. Like, the prose was really good, especially in part 1. Made me think about the etymology of certain words in ways that I'd never really thought of them before, which was really fun. And a lot of the thematic portrait being painted in Canticle for Leibowitz is just really impressive, and really easy to appreciate. And as long as you're not somebody who's just inherently anti-religion in any way, shape, or form, like an anti-theist, even if you're atheist, but, you know, can respect people who follow religion or have deep religious beliefs, I think A Canticle for Leibowitz is a must-read for basically everybody. At least the first 2 chapters of it could be like a short story and be like a perfect short story. The first part of it is definitely great inspiration for what most post-apocalyptic novels of this day kind of fall in line with, and it's really great for that reason. But if you're just in for good theological and thematic, just really great painting that are going to make you think, this book is really great for that. The other book, the third book that I did read and finish this month, even though I thought I was going to get more done, I did read The Great Train Robbery, the third book in this little Wing Books collection of his first 3 published novels by Michael Crichton. Great Train Robbery was good fun, I will say. I think it's my least favorite of these 3 books in the collection, and thus of the Crichton that I've read since starting this channel. But it wasn't a bad book at all. Crichton is just pretty reliably solid. As long as you just kind of enjoy being taken along for the ride, he is one that is very easy to ride along with. And Great Train Robbery was no different. I was a little bit surprised by how much of the book was the setup versus how much of it was the payoff and resolution. But by the time you get there and by the time you're invested in all of that material, it was a great finale. Really enjoyed the book. It wasn't my favorite thing in the world, but it was definitely a good palate cleanser, something a little bit different to take my mind off of some of the more sci-fi fantasy, theological, thematic stuff that like A Canticle for Leibowitz was doing, but I enjoyed it a lot. Which leads me into, I guess I could say this. I started volume 4 of Monster as well in November. I'm not super far into it, about a fifth of the way through, like 21% or something like that. This arc, which started with the last few chapters of volume 3, has been continuing on in this volume very splendidly. I'm very into it, where I was a little bit more confused and lukewarm about it. At the end of volume 3, it's definitely developing into something pretty great so far. I think by the time this video comes out, in fact, I'm fairly certain by the time this video comes out, I will be done with this book, because I have a ton of videos that I'm working on this weekend to kind of, bolster the December video count. And by the time all of those videos are rendering, this is going to be what I'm reading while that happens. So I think I'll be finished with this by the time the video comes out, but for now I only have that little bit that I can talk about. I'll talk about it a little bit more in depth next month when I have my next reading wrap up. Or if you want to check out the next Fortnite on the Owl video, which I believe will be this coming Sunday, that will also update you a little bit on my reading. And I would think by that time I would have this probably finished or pretty close to finished. So you can hear a little bit more about that in those spots. But that was my reading for November. For my book of the month, this was actually a little bit hard to determine, because I would say none of these 3 books were 5-star reads. They were just solid, good, enjoyable times. But because of how much I enjoyed parts 1 and 2 of A Canticle for Leibowitz, I think this kind of has to be my book of the month. I didn't really like part 3 very much, I have to admit. I'm not going to get into a lot of the reasons why, but certain parts of the thematic argument, we'll say, happening in this third part didn't sit right with me, where there was like a couple different people who had different belief set or different belief systems that kind of conflict with each other, and I feel like I was supposed to empathize with both of them and kind of struggle with the argument because of that, and I found myself not empathizing with either of them for some reason, which kind of felt off. And a lot of the thematic portrait of part 3 is a little bit more obtuse and stilted, due in no small part to the fact that there's just a little bit too much of a time jump between parts 2 and 3. It feels like there's a missing part in between them. So even though part 3 wasn't my favorite thing in the world, the first 2 parts of this were really, really, really good, and just so thematically brilliant, just to a point where like I can't even like recall everything that was in there to analyze, and let alone actually analyze it myself. I'm not that smart, but it's just really good. It's really, really good. And I'm surprised this is my book of the month. I was kind of expecting for Ruin to be the book of the month, but Canticle for Leibowitz definitely did it for me. And so now we kind of round off this video just like normal, talking about what I plan to read next month. Of course, I did mention Monster Volume 4. I'm probably going to have this volume finished by the time this video comes out. If I have time through the month, I also plan to finish volume 5 of it, so that'll be a couple volumes of this manga going through. Hopefully I'll hit my stride with this by the time I'm getting towards that point and like kind of start to blow through the last few volumes because of how good the reputation for them is. Been really enjoying my time with the series, just haven't had as much time to read it as I thought I would, due in no small part to spending 3 weeks on Ruin last month and just like, man, I need to finish a couple of books this month, otherwise I'm going to be in trouble. So Monster kind of fell by the wayside as a result of that. I hope to spend more time with that this month. But for the actual books, I have quite an interesting and I feel like diverse reading planned out, and you probably already saw a couple of these in the thumbnail. The first thing I want to talk about is Wrath, of course, the fourth book in Faithful and the Fallen, which is, I know, what a concept. KC reading multiple books in a series back to back and actually like finishing a series. What? Yeah, I know, it's kind of crazy that this is actually happening, but I plan to finish Wrath this year, this month, and to be done with the series. In fact, as of the day I'm recording this, I have already started. I'm about 60 pages through, and it's pretty good. There's a little bit of funkiness with sort of the timeline that's going on with a few of the plot lines, where a couple of them are like a good, decent bit ahead of time compared to where one left off, which is kind of weird in some ways. But as for the actual material of what's actually happening on the page, I am enjoying it quite a bit so far, and I hope for that to remain consistent through the rest of the book. The other book that I do plan to read essentially in its entirety through the rest of the month is going to be a nonfiction book, one of the first, if not the first nonfiction book I've read for the channel in a hot minute. I've read like 127 Hours and Endurance, and besides those two that I've read and reviewed, I don't remember how many nonfiction books I've read or reviewed on the channel, but this is definitely one of my more anticipated reads of the year. This is We Who Wrestle with God by Jordan Peterson. As soon as I knew that this was a thing that was coming out, I was super excited to get a hold of it and actually check it out. I had it pre-ordered from basically the moment that I could have it pre-ordered, and I'm really, really looking forward to it. Peterson's discussions on the psychological and story side of the Bible, so say like his lectures he did on Genesis, for example, and even like some of his university courses like the Maps of Meaning and Personality and its Transformations and stuff like that, is stuff that's always really fascinated me. There's something about the way that Peterson conveys ideas and can go between points and wrap them back around on each other that I've personally found to be pretty profound a lot of the time, and I just enjoy listening to that kind of stuff. And even though I own his other books, Maps of Meaning and both of the 12 Rules for Life books, We Who Wrestle with God is going to be the first Peterson that I actually read, the first book that I actually read, and I'm really looking forward to it. Somebody who is a little bit religious, but also not very active in that faith, active in practicing that faith, much to my own disappointment, will say this is one that I hope kind of kickstarts a little bit more of that by helping me to think about some of these stories in a little bit of a different way. That's what I hope to get from it, and I'm really, really excited for it. That is for sure. But that is basically all I have planned actually for December. The other one of these I sort of have planned, but it's also like an if I have time thing. So the maybe read is more like a I will start this month. It's just a little bit of a question of when I start it and how much of it I actually get read. That is another thick book, which is just being thrown on here basically last minute. Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett, of course, one of the most legendary books out there at this point. It is considered a classic for good reasons, at least a modern classic at this point. It's over 1,000 pages. It's nearly 1,100 pages. So the fact that I'm just kind of throwing this in more or less on a whim seems really crazy, and it is. But like A Canticle for Leibowitz for the Red Company, we picked another read-along book to happen for December and January. So this is definitely going to bleed into next year. I do not expect to be able to read these two books, read some manga, and also read this in December. I'm not fast enough for that. But Pillars of the Earth, I definitely plan to start at some point this month. Probably the minute that I finish Wrath will be when I start Pillars of the Earth. Not sure how long it's going to take me. I've heard plenty of people say that these books read pretty quick, or they're really engrossing, and so they're pretty easy to just kind of fall headfirst into. I hope that's the case for sure, because I want to read this pretty quick, comparatively speaking, but I'm excited for it after hearing so many good things for Kingsbridge as a whole, both this book and like World Without End, for example. I'm just looking forward to it. There's no saying for sure when I'm going to start it. It might even be like the last week of the month or something. I might just read both Wrath and We Who Wrestle with God in the first few weeks, and then start Pillars of the Earth at the very end of the month. I haven't quite decided yet, but that will be getting started at some point this month. It's just a matter of when at this point. But yeah, so that is the video. Before adding Pillars of the Earth to the count, it was looking like it was just going to be these two books plus a little bit of manga. So it was looking like it was going to be a pretty chill end to the year, a really chill final month of my reading for 2024. But it doesn't really matter. I'm excited for Pillars of the Earth, and I don't see any reason why it should ruin my reading. At the end of the day, it's been a great year. I've been pretty happy with my reading through the majority of it, which we'll discuss at length next month, which is also next year in January 2025. But let's round it out with a series completion in Wrath, a very highly anticipated new release in We Who Wrestle with God, and a pretty much a classic masterpiece, as it says right up here, that has a lot of buzz around it basically at all times with Pillars of the Earth. I'm excited. And that's how it is. Whatever your reading is for the month of December as we kind of round out 2024, whatever you're excited about getting to, let me know. Shout that out in the comments below. I'm looking forward to hearing what some other people are reading. If anybody's reading some of this other stuff alongside me this month, I have a couple people who I'm reading the Peterson book with, and then of course the Red Company server that I'm going to be reading the Ken Follett book with. Whoever else may be reading some of this stuff, give me a shout below. I look forward to hearing a little bit more. But that's going to be the end of this video. Stick around and come back on Thursday for my November book haul video. I got a couple of things to show off there. In fact, one of them I've technically showed off because We Who Wrestle with God just came out in November. If you want to see that and a little bit more of the things that I've collected, come back for that on Thursday. But either way, thank you guys for watching. I hope to see you guys in the next video.